You know what's funny? I never thought a cabin by the lake would nearly cost me my life. People dream about a peaceful retirement, fishing in the mornings, reading on the porch. Nobody ever tells you about the HOA queenpin who's willing to do anything, literally anything, to steal it out from under you. That's how my story starts, with Karen Mitchell marching up to my cabin, dragging her grown son along like a trophy, and telling me, "This log house will be the birthday gift I want to give him." She pointed right in my face, like I was some stray dog she was about to shoo off, and hissed, "You should retreat peacefully if you don't want to be sued." I almost spit out my coffee laughing. If only she knew who she was threatening. But Karen, she's not one to back down easy. So the next thing I know, she's on the phone with 911, her voice suddenly trembling, sobbing about how an intruder is threatening her and her precious son. I didn't even have time to explain before the police showed up, tires crunching on the gravel, and the officer stepped out, hand on his gun, cold eyes locked on me. He sized me up. Then his eyes landed on the old Army insignia pinned to my chest, and just like that, his whole attitude flipped. "Yes, Major General. How can we assist you today, sir?" Karen's jaw hit the ground so hard you'd have thought she'd tripped on her own sense of entitlement. Let me back up a sec. 6 months before that circus on my porch, I'd just inherited this cabin from my grandfather. I'm Michael Harrison, retired architect, 30 years in military intelligence. Yeah, that's right. 3 decades of secrets, discipline, and the kind of patience only old fishermen and career spooks understand. The place had always been my safe haven, tucked away on Pine Lake. Grandpa used to say, "Mikey, the biggest fish aren't the strongest, they're the ones that wait for exactly the right moment." I should have remembered that, because trouble was brewing from the second I moved in. Now, Karen, she was a force of nature. Late 40s, former corporate lawyer, president of the Pine Lake HOA, with hair so perfectly styled it looked like she ironed it every morning. She could weaponize a smile in court, and her son Brandon, well, let's just say if loafers ever left calluses, he'd have the softest hands in 3 counties. That morning, I was on the deck, going over some old blueprints when the SUV rolled up and out strutted Karen, suit sharp enough to slice through a mortgage contract, Brandon trailing after her, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Harrison, I hope you've reconsidered our generous offer," she sang out, her voice sugar but her eyes pure arsenic. "There was no offer, Karen," I told her, "just a lot of threats and demands." She didn't even flinch, just gave that look predators give before the launch. "Brandon has his heart set on this place for his birthday. Don't you, sweetie?" He nodded, but I saw him waver. Karen leaned in. The soundproofing in the basement would be ideal for his music studio. The way she said it, my skin prickled, and not because I care about music. See, what she wanted wasn't just property, it was total control. She started small, muffins at my door, all smiles, but always with questions. Was I alone? Did I plan to live here full-time? Did anyone visit? Then came the official letters, dock repairs, mailbox too old, lawn too long, violations nobody had mentioned in 50 years. Each notice carried the sting of $1,000. Each rule felt tailor-made to make me pack up and go. I tried to reason with her once, at her massive desk, property files splayed out like a prosecutor about to close the case. "These violations aren't personal," she purred, but her eyes were hungry. "Your grandfather was grandfathered in under old standards. Times change. Yeah, so do predators." One night, as I sat on the dock, I found a crumpled note shoved under my screen. 3 letters, shaky as hell. "Help me. H." Somebody out there was scared for their life, and suddenly this wasn't just about property. I started noticing more. The mailbox tampered with, footprints around my basement windows, Karen's visits getting bolder, always circling back to the basement, always hinting at how private, how isolated it all was. When Brandon started showing up drunk, threatening me, slurring about how his mom has connections, I knew things were spinning out of control. He said, "Harry needs to be moved sooner than we planned." I filed that name away. The twist came when I followed Karen one Friday, her pristine white SUV heading 30 miles out of town to Mercy General Hospital. Turns out, she had a husband, Harry Mitchell, room 314. Frail, mostly paralyzed, eyes full of fear, especially when Karen showed up with a little cup of vitamins. The nurse told me, every time his wife visits, his symptoms get worse. I recognized his handwriting. He was the one who left the note. Karen was poisoning her husband, slow enough to fool doctors, cruel enough to make sure he couldn't tell anyone. She'd been setting him up for death, and my cabin? That was meant to be his last prison, soundproof and remote, the perfect place to finish the job. By the time Karen showed up at my door that night, mask slipping, voice trembling, she looked less like a queen and more like a rat in a trap. "There are things about Harry you need to understand," she said, trying to rope me in, confessing more than she realized. "Harry is worth $2.3 billion. He's difficult, controlling, always threatening to change his will." She admitted, flat out, that she'd poisoned him with carefully chosen toxins, ones that wouldn't show up in standard tests, ones that would leave him alive but helpless, unable to cry for help. Then she laid out her whole twisted plan, how she'd done it before. 3 husbands, all dead, all tragic accidents. Every time walking away richer. "Brandon isn't my son," she whispered. "He's my nephew. Been grooming him for years." She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You know too much. You can help me, or you can disappear." She gave me 24 hours. That's all she thought she needed to turn my sanctuary into a torture chamber. What she didn't know was that old habits die hard. I'd recorded everything, every word, every threat, every confession. I reached out to Officer Rodriguez, the only local cop I trusted, and played him the tape. He didn't hesitate, called in the feds right away. The FBI sent Agent Sarah Collins, sharp as a tack and twice as stubborn, and together we set the trap. "You'll help us catch her in the act?" she asked. I didn't even blink. After 30 years in the service, letting a monster like Karen keep hunting wasn't an option. The next night, the whole operation went down. Karen pulled up in a white medical van, Brandon pale as a ghost, and they wheeled Harry inside, ready to make my basement his final stop. Karen was all business, prepping her poison, chirping about privacy and comfort. As soon as she started filling that syringe, FBI agents burst from the shadows, weapons drawn, badge flashes everywhere. "Karen Mitchell, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy." She didn't go quietly, started screaming about entrapment, about being set up, playing the victim like her life depended on it. But then Harry, weak as he was, managed to grab Agent Collins's hand, spelled out on her palm, "Karen poison help." It was over. Karen went down for 3 counts of first-degree murder, attempted murder, conspiracy, 3 life sentences, no parole. Brandon, who'd been manipulated since he was 12, broke down on the stand. The judge gave him 8 years, plus counseling, acknowledging he'd been groomed as much as anyone. Harry, miraculously, recovered, months of treatment, but he made it back, voice shaking as he stood on my dock and told me, "You gave me back my life, Mike. I can never repay that." The real shockwave hit the Pine Lake community when Karen's crimes came out. Folks who'd sided with her during the harassment campaign hung their heads, ashamed at how easily they'd been duped. The new HOA rewrote every bylaw, threw out the old guard, even offered to make me honorary lifetime member. I declined, but accepted help with repairs. Harry used part of his fortune to start a foundation for victims of abuse, turning my once-cursed basement into a meeting space for survivors. Poetic, right? The very place Karen planned as a tomb became a home for healing. Now, Pine Lake's a different place. Open meetings, no more secrets. Neighbors actually look out for each other. Sometimes I sit on the porch, sun setting just like it used to with Grandpa, and I think about patience. The biggest fish aren't always the strongest. They're the ones who wait for the right moment to bite. Karen thought she was the shark, but in the end, she was just another fish caught in a net she spun herself. So here's my question for you. Have you ever felt powerless against a bully, an HOA dictator, or a neighbor who pushed you too far? Trust me, you're not alone. If my story hit home, drop your wildest HOA tale in the comments. Let's see who survived the craziest neighborhood drama. Hit like, subscribe if you want more stories of ordinary folks taking down extraordinary monsters. And remember, sometimes justice isn't about being the strongest, it's about knowing when to strike. What would you have done in my shoes? And do you think any punishment could ever be enough for someone like Karen? I'll be on the porch, waiting to hear your answers.